Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce. I'm joined by my good friend. It's been too long, my guy. It's good to be back on a microphone with you. I am joined by Juice. We're here talking Bellinger trade. Obviously, that's the big news in the cycle today. Jed Hoyer, Kyle Tucker, and Carson Kelly all spoke to the media. I think Carson Kelly actually just wrapped up maybe just minutes ago, to be honest with you. But we're going to talk all about it. We're going to get Juice's thoughts on the Tucker trade. Obviously, people that have listened to our most recent show already know my thoughts. Now that it's, 72 hours in arrears, I might have some things to add, but we're going to get to all that. But before we do, Juice, buddy, how's it going, man?
What's up, man? Nothing. Just going through the holiday season, trying to close things out. It was funny. I was watching the little intro that we do, and it's like the ghosts of Cubs past as that intro goes. I mean, Morel's in there. I think, Belly's in there too, if I'm not mistaken.
Stroman's in there too, yeah.
Stroman's in there. It's like it's the ghost of the Cubs past. Maybe we'll put it on the books to get a new one for this year. Put something together.
We've got some updating to do. That is for certain. But yeah, Juice, no, I feel you, man. It's the year end. People are in full swing. And I'll tell you what, you and I talked a little bit before the show, and I think it's worth rehashing for those that are joining us here, whether in audio version or live here as we broadcast on YouTube. It really is kind of a tale of 2 years so far for I'll call it the holiday season, right? Last year was, we're waiting. Oh, now Shohei Ohtani signed. Now the rest of the baseball offseason can happen. Whereas this year, even with the big fish that is Juan Soto, who obviously ultimately gets more money than Shohei Ohtani at the end of the day, there's still but there's so much else that happened. Soto and Ohtani signed around the same time, but there's so much else that happened this offseason. First off, the Cubs in general have made multiple moves already before the end of the year, which was the complete opposite case a year ago, where all their significant additions for the year happened in January or even in February, obviously, as we saw Bellinger drag out long beyond the Cubs convention. It's refreshing seeing them making moves earlier in the offseason and still kind of leaving this open opportunity for more to happen now coming forward. And we got a taste of that a little bit today with the Bellinger trade.
I think it's a testament to where this franchise is at, right? I mean, let's go back to 2022. And they just barely missed the playoffs. They had such a decent year. It was exciting, right? But we also kind of knew that the base roster was going to be the base roster. The 2023 season, you go in there and you kind of fall flat on your face with, some guys that you added to the mix, but not enough. So we kind of went into this offseason knowing that a few things needed to be changed. 2024 you needed to add some power. You need to add some more bullpen help because you've gone 2 years of trying to, do these reclamation projects and using, pitch lab as much as they could over the last 2 years. Now it's more or less, that's kind of failed. We've kind of failed at this run prevention kind of thing. Not to say that guys like Kyle Tucker aren't run preventers, but they're really known for their power. So as we sit here and it's December 17th, I think it's a few things. I think in terms of a Cubs fan, you look at this roster needed a lot of overhaul. What was going on wasn't working. But if you look in terms of the MLB as a whole, I think what's going on with these RSNs is definitely impacting some player movement. You're seeing a lot of teams trying to, shed some cap. You're seeing the overlay of maybe a 2026 strike being, over kind of the cloud that's over this whole offseason as well, because a lot of guys don't know what the 2026 negotiations will look like in terms of salary, in terms of, player money.
For those that don't realize, the collective bargaining agreement expires as of 12/31/2025, more or less.
Yeah, so 2026, there's a lot on the docket. There's a potential of a salary cap, which I think some owners, given the way that the Dodgers and the Mets have spent, are going to definitely, go to bat for that. Players, too, are going to look at trying to bat that down as much as they can as well because they make enough. I'll say this. I think that 2026 will be an interesting back and forth between the players and the owners because I don't think there's much alignment with either of them. And there's a really good chance that 2026 comes with some new rules, or there's a long wait in terms of the season started. We may get
Yeah.
so. Yeah, I think in regards to this offseason with all the excitement that's kind of happened, it's a lot of things. It's the fact that going into the offseason, Soto kind of had his market, who he expected to be in it, and once that big fish goes, then these teams that aren't spending are like, all right, well, we got to cut some of our best players because we need to find a way to, better our team or, rid of some of this cap money because we don't have the revenue that we thought we were going to have, coming in.
Right.
But it's interesting. I like what they did with Tucker because it's a cheap 1-year deal and it gives them the flexibility in the future to go ahead and extend him if they want to. I think he's going to hit the market because why wouldn't you after a Soto signing? He's not every bit, but he's going to get a lot of money once he goes out in there. And why wouldn't you test free agency? But
Definitely.
I do enjoy what's going on. It's much better than sitting on our hands, just waiting for things to happen.
Indeed, and speaking of things happening, let's get to. It felt like the elephant in the room, right? I mean, this has been the elephant in the room since days. It feels like after the season ended, that there were reports that the Cubs could trade either Bellinger or Nico Horner this offseason, which eventually evolved into Seiya Suzuki potentially being moved, which then ultimately led them to getting Kyle Tucker. And then everybody's like, oh, okay, well, now you have a logjam because you have 3 right fielders on your roster effectively right now. I know Belly's also can play center, but let's be real. If was going to play with the Cubs, it was going to be in right field. He was not going to supplant what PCA did at the end of last season. So now Belly's gone, right? They trade Bellinger. It finally happens. I think this is, as much as I hate to see Belly go, I'm happy it just happened because now we don't have to fucking talk about it anymore. I mean, it was really, honestly, like I've seen a lot of other people that jump on microphones and talk about the Chicago Cubs feel the exact same way. And it's just because it's like, it's just been this looming cloud in terms of what the Cubs are going to do this offseason. But they took care of business. And Sonny has a comment here in the comment section already blowing up that we're going to get to as many of them as we can. But Sonny said a little bit earlier, says, I'm perfectly content with the Bellinger trade as long as the dollars saved are used elsewhere. And I think that's what some people are failing to see in terms of this, because I agree. Cody Bellinger is still a really good baseball player, right? And if Cody Bellinger was being paid $17-18 million like he was in 2023, then you could maybe make the argument that he would still be here and they would just figure it out. Or you would move a different piece in order to upgrade somewhere else. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it was, okay, well, Bellinger's got this tons of money that he's making. He is not performing like a almost $28 million a year player. Rather, he's performing like probably a guy that makes about $15 million with a 761 OPS. That's where the Cubs felt like they could move on from him. He was the easiest to move. There was no trade clause. There was no trade clause. I hate double negatives, but there was no trade clause that the Cubs had to worry about. So they move out, they go out, they get the deal done. And Juice, like Sonny kind of said, right? This is really, at the end of the day, it's moving money around to ideally, and I'm going to say that with heavy emphasis, ideally use it to improve somewhere else on the roster. And you dropped something in our Cubs on Tap group chat that there's already rumblings. Now, whether they're valid or not, obviously remains to be seen. They are exactly that, but that maybe the Cubs are sniffing around the old hen house that is Corbin Burns again, because now there's money to be spent when there wasn't before, per se, with Bellinger. So I know people are upset about Cody leaving. I'm just upset that we don't get belly bombs anymore. Because the video of you and Tyler from Wrigley when we were all there together is probably one of my favorite pieces of content we've made at the ballpark together. But the fact that hopefully now they're going to use this money, turn around and upgrade some other portion of the team is where I'm trying to mentally take myself of saying, okay, this is why this is happening. And now Michael Busch is probably playing first base next year, as Jed Hoyer alluded to in his press conference earlier today. We all know Kyle Tucker's going to play right field, and Seiya Suzuki's probably still going to be your everyday DH.
Yeah, and I think too, like looking at Cody Bellinger in comparison to Michael Busch, that's everybody who was clamoring, oh, let's just put Cody at first. if you go back and look at Michael Busch's numbers compared to Cody Bellinger, Michael Busch had a better year last year, and he's younger, and he hit more home runs, and it was a very similar amount of at bats. Actually, Busch had less at bats last year than Bellinger did, and he put up a better OPS, 775. So you're looking at a player that's maybe kind of ascending, where you look at Cody Bellinger with the injury history that he's had, with the lack of. I wouldn't say that he was somebody that I worried about on the base pass. He was a pretty good base runner, but I always thought he would steal more bases as a Cub than he did, because I think he has better speed than what showed. And I know that Busch isn't going to do that, but you're going to supplement that with Kyle Tucker, who could steal 30 bases, and you're also going to have a Pico Armstrong out there who can run. So you look at this team, I think that with what they've done, they've gotten more athletic, and also they're giving their young guys like Michael Busch, which I laugh at young because he's only 2 years younger than Cody Bellinger. And I laugh at myself at that comment. But I do think that what we saw from Michael Busch was a lot of untapped potential as of last year, too. I think that there's more room for growth. He hit 21 home runs last year. I think this is a guy that, if all things go well, and mind you, we said the same thing about Christopher Morel, and that didn't work out. I think we could maybe look at Michael Busch as a guy who can maybe hit 25 to 30 bombs consistently. I think that's a realistic expectation, and I think the Cubs think that as well. But looking at where the team is now, you essentially put Kyle Tucker in Cody Bellinger's spot, and you're giving a young guy an opportunity to play first base. And now, like you said, Ron, you can go out and address the things that made you a non-playoff team last year. The bullpen, the lack of the top line starting pitching. Let's not get it twisted here. I liked what they did last year. I still like their starting pitching. It just lacks that guy that in a series, if you get in the playoffs, you're worried about, other than Justin Steele. I mean, Justin Steele can give you 7 immaculate innings, right? But after that, you really worry about, you don't know what you're going to get out of Shota Imanaga next year, second time around. It seemed like if it was too close of a start with the other team as well, I don't know if you remember during the season, he would get kind of hit around that second time when they started to see his windup and some of the shaping of his pitches. So I think that if you go out there and get that top of the line starter, you really make it difficult to where you can look in a series and go, man, in 4 games, I got to worry about Justin Steele, and maybe it's Corbin Burns. Maybe it's a Luis Castillo. Maybe it's a Luzardo that we've been linked to as well.
Sure.
It just makes that starting pitching so much more better, and it gives you an opportunity to move Javier Assad from the starting rotation to the bullpen, which we were talking about off air. He has great stuff out of that as well. So it kind of lengthens a part of your team that's weak if you're able to go and get a starter right now, because I think that's what they want to do. I think they want to add another starter, and by adding another starter, it also adds you a bullpen arm in Javier Assad.
Indeed, it does. And I think that then allows them to really add probably 2 more bullpen arms. Realistically, a lefty. I think that is the key that everybody wants to see, whether that's an AJ Minter or whether that's somebody like a big fish like Jeremiah chimed for here a little bit ago, and a guy like Tanner Scott. Tanner Scott would kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, obviously being a closer as well, but you figure a guy that can probably close games is on that list as well. You and I have both talked before, and I think I've mentioned it already this offseason about like a Jorge Lopez being re-signed by the Cubs. I think that would be a perfect type of move, especially because he's probably only going to cost you like $6-7 million bucks. It's not going to be a guy who, I know Kirby Yates is a big hot topic name right now for the Cubs, but like if Kirby Yates is going to cost you more than $10 million, is it really worth it for a guy who's 39 years old? And I don't know, right? Like I don't know where there is to go here. I will say this, and great comments from everybody, from Omar, from my dad, from Jeremiah. Like I said, we're going to get to as many of these as we can. Ronald Duffney, who was the first one in a little bit earlier, but I think there's a lot of concerns. One concern from Darren here. He says he wishes he has a crystal ball that read Shaw is going to handle third base just fine and be there for the next 8 years. I think there is still very much concern amongst people, because now Unfortunately, Cody Bellinger couldn't play third base, right?
Yeah, it would have been great, right?
If he could, he's probably still on the roster.
He's definitely
and I know
on the roster.
And I know there's people that say, oh, well, what about Michael Busch? He could have played third base, but it's like, but Jed Hoyer made it very clear today in his press conference that they see Michael Busch as a Gold Glove first baseman. And I agree. Michael Busch had a really good defensive year last year. Nobody talked about it. He was really, really good defensively last year. I believe at one point it was probably come like August, I believe he was top in the leagues of first baseman by defensive runs saved. Like higher than guys like Freddie Freeman and some very notable names in baseball. He had a really good freaking year. So I understand the concern still of third base. And I think that's something that the Cubs are trying to figure out of, do they get a third baseman, right? There's been rumors and reports that the Cubs are still very much looking for potential third baseman. That way, maybe Shaw isn't playing there right away. Maybe somebody that just comes in to contest with Shaw early on. But it's gonna be interesting to see because Brandon B says here, he says, guys, I don't like the move. It feels like addition by subtraction. And I can see where that concern lies. I just think the unfortunate nature is Bellinger plays positions that the Cubs are confident with what they have there. Mm-hmm. I think most Cubs fans are going to say PCA, like we're comfortable with PCA in center field, right? I think most Cubs fans are going to obviously say we're comfortable with Kyle Tucker, who has a Gold Glove playing right field. And I honestly do feel really good about Michael Busch playing first base. Truly. I know Belly's a good first baseman, and I know what that entails, but this was a move now that ideally, like you said, it's a reallocation of assets more so than it is like there. And don't get me wrong, I'm going to be the first one now because I've had a lot of thinking and feeling change, and I will bitch about Ricketts being a cheap SOB when I need to. But in this case, I know people love Bellinger. And even if he does have a bounce back year, let's say he has a quote unquote bounce back year and he improves by 30 points in his OPS. He's still under an 800 OPS making over $25 million a year. The math doesn't math. And I love Cody Bellinger just as much as the next person does. Trust me. I got a Cody Bellinger jersey hanging in the closet. I'm a big fan. But the key is here, though, now you got to go turn around and use that $25 million, like you said, just maybe on a starter. And then maybe you use some of the other funds that you already had and you go out and grab, I don't know, 2-3 bullpen arms. And then you keep it moving from there because and Brandon B says here, and I understand the concern of people feeling this way, since it feels like a one-year team at this point. The Cubs are pushing the chips in on this upcoming year. I would argue they really haven't gone all in on this year. You still have your top 6 prospects unchanged. You've given up one top 10 prospect for a guy who is an MVP caliber player in baseball.
Yeah, and I mean, just to go back to Darren's comment earlier about Shaw playing third, I may have been the only person who's on this show who said that I don't think he can do it.
Right.
I did watch him in South Bend, and yeah, he's got the tools. I think that, we watched Nick Madrigal, do 5 pro hops before he threw the ball to first base, which there's a way to get it done, but he's not going to be that Nolan Arenado arm at third. Mm-hmm. That's just not, he's going to have to play the position a different way, which obviously can result in more base hits to that side of it. Or, there are other things that analytically it changes when you can't, rely on that arm. But I think that he's a plus bat and he's going to help that in that way. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't surprise me if the Nico Horner trades aren't, done and over with either. Seiya Suzuki as well. I think what Jed is kind of doing with this roster is putting out there those 2 guys, and I'm just trying to get better here. That's mm-hmm. At the end of the day, that mix didn't work. So I don't know. I also think too, I don't think you're really going all in because, Brandon B brings up another point about your one big injury from being in big trouble. Yeah, but you're also 1 year closer to those prospects that you kept in the top 10 being closer to the MLB. I mean, we're looking at a guy like Owen Casey being maybe on this roster next year if he's not traded. I think the same goes to, Kevin Alcantara got some time last year. They have outfield depth. They have some infield depth. They got some guys that you've watched, kind of at the middle group, kind of meaning at like AA, on the verge of going to AAA. That one big breakthrough and they're in the MLB. I think that's the common theme with today's league. You're spending less and less time in the minors, in my opinion. I really think that, and we've seen that with pitchers. We've seen that with hitters. If you get it and you can play, these MLB teams are going to find a way to get you in the roster. There's
100%.
less reason to manipulate the service time anymore. So
agreed.
I think that their depth also gives them the opportunity that if you do get that one big injury, you could trade from it. There's going to be some guys out there that, come available at the beginning of the season or at the deadline. But I don't know. I think as you look at this trade, you're going to miss his versatility. You're going to miss, the left-handed pop. Like I always say, it's hard to find. But if they didn't get Kyle Tucker, I'd be more worried. It's like
1,000%.
If you're looking at this team and let's say that they signed an Anthony Santander and then they went behind it and then they traded Cody Bellinger, then I'd be like, I don't get it. But you added lefty pop, and you're talking about a guy like Michael Busch, who is lefty pop. So I think it kind of turns now. You need more right-handed thump. A lot of your guys in their lineup are, iffy 15 to 20 guys. Be nice if they could add like some nice right-handed thump at, if it's not third base, if it's, maybe you're finding a way to get a catcher in the middle of the year who could hit some home runs. Maybe you're finding a way to add like another DH, or maybe you're trading second base to then move Shaw over to there to then find a way to find a third baseman with thump. So it's interesting. And I think that comment from Jeremiah is probably the next conversation that we have to have.
Is Alex Bregman a legitimate target of the Cubs? Yeah. I mean, and that's the only downside, I think, to this offseason for the Cubs when it comes to third base is it's the market of third baseman is largely Alex Bregman or bust. I mean, worst case scenario, maybe you argue that Yoan Moncada has any kind of value as a third baseman.
Would they ever be interested in calling their rival? And, maybe you give up a prospect more premium for a Nolan Arenado. I know he's out there. That would suck. I mean, to definitely, have that guy in your division. But if you truly wanted to go all in, maybe that's a move you make. I know he wasn't great last year, but he can play the position. That's my point at it.
True. No, absolutely. And then certainly something to happen there. And Darren says here, he says, great point, Juice. It's not as fun at the moment, but maybe hold some chips back for a deadline trade for the biggest need. And that's the one PSA I think I want to give to pretty much everybody that's listening to the show here. And I know you agree with this, Juice. They're not done.
No.
They are not done. Like I think everybody hates the Jed Hoyer, we're in the fifth inning bullshit metaphors. I understand that. Yeah. But legitimately, look at last season. Everybody was so upset that they didn't do anything. And you added Busch into the fray and you added Shota essentially to replace Stroman, and you ran it back and you won 83 games again. I think for the people that feel like, why would you get rid of Cody Bellinger and why would you do this and why would you do that? You're begging this team to run it back and be an 83-win team again. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. That's what it is. And right now, there's a very real possibility that the Cubs do make another trade that involves some prospects, and they might get a third baseman, or they might get that starter, or they might get a big bullpen arm. And I know Jeremiah said a little bit earlier in the comment section about like a Class A. It's probably a little bit out of their, I would say, prospect, just what they want to give up for a guy. I think it's the same reason we won't see a Mason Miller trade. But this is a good year for bullpen arms, a good year to go sign guys who are that kind of, I'll call it the David Robertson of old years, or the Michael Givens, if you remember, right? Mm-hmm. Where, hey, you sign for 1 year, $5-6 million bucks. If you're really good, you can go get paid next year in free agency, and the Cubs will figure it out. But at least those guys are available this year to go out and spend $8 million on. Kyle Finnegan's out there. This guy saved 30-something games for the Nationals last year, albeit to a tune of 3.74 ERA. But he still got the job done, right? There's a lot of those guys. I've really started to like what I see out of a guy like Andrew Kittredge. I think he would be a beautiful dollar value signing. Again, he's not a closer. You still need a lefty then, but like he's the perfect $6 million for 1 year guy. They're not done. So no. I think everybody that's assuming this Bellinger trade is it now. I would recommend to breathe, go look at some Christmas lights, and then get mad online in January because there's going to be some things that happen, and I don't know how much is going to happen in the next week. I've talked to my dad about this quite a bit, and I think this is really the first time I'm going to get to say it on air. If nothing happens by Friday, you probably aren't hearing about much happening until after the new year because things are going to slow down for the holidays. There will be things happening during the holidays, but it will not be at the same aggressive clip that it is outside of the holiday season. So realistically, this is a long game. It's probably post CubsCon too, right? Like I think the big names are going to be done, probably close to done by CubsCon. But you got a lot of other ones that are coming into the fold. And yeah, Jeremiah, Ryan Tepera signed a minor league contract to come back to the Cubs. Isn't that crazy?
No, look at the Cubs. They let Jeremiah Estrada leave, around this time last year as well, right? That's and he's a Padre.
Yeah, and looks great.
Has been great for them. There's a lot of names that are good. I mean, maybe this is the other thing too that I think we need to definitely highlight. We aren't in the building with them seeing the development of what is in their system either right now as well.
True.
So I know there's been a lot of talk about Daniel Palencia as well with his new arm slot. And, maybe he's finding a way to, tap that potential because we know he could throw hard, but it's just finding that second pitch. It's finding ways to, fool hitters a little. Maybe he's a guy that gives you a chance. That's why I say, go get a starter right now before the end of the week. Figure out who it is, make a deal, because then that allows you to put guys like Ben Brown, who didn't get a full year last year. Now is a perfect year to use him out of the bullpen. I said earlier, Javier Assad. Maybe you're using a guy like Daniel Palencia. Add a lefty. Add another right-handed power guy, maybe at the back end. And then you still have guys like Porter Hodge, who showed a lot of promise out of the bullpen last year. And Morgan, who you traded for, at the beginning of the offseason here.
Right.
So
I think a lot of people forget that Eli Morgan's a Cub.
Yeah, and he's great. He's a great pitcher. He's a guy that really can slot into those 7th and 8th. So I think that they're in a really good spot because I think that now with this money freed up, it allows them to, peg the holes that they didn't have. But like you said, there's always going to be one position that they don't address. And I think we, as Cubs fans, if we were to bet going into, it's going to be third base. I think that everything that Jed Hoyer said today was, I'm not going to give him the position on December 17th. He's going to have to earn it, but we are going to give him every single opportunity to take that position. So to me, that sounds like he's the favorite. We're not going to sign anything. If it doesn't work, we will address it at the deadline. We will find a way to find a third baseman then. So I think we need to, realistically look and wrap our minds around the fact that a guy like Bregman's probably not going to be here. They're not going to call up their rival, like I alluded to earlier, and say, hey, let me get this guy. Or I forgot, what was the name? You had mentioned a name earlier that I'm blanking on. Moncada. I think maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe you platoon Shaw a little bit. Maybe it gives Nico Horner more days off. You could play Shaw at second on days that Nico needs a rest, and and I don't mind lefty with pop like Moncada's, who's realistically playing for his MLB career. I've said it on the show often. There's nothing more motivating than losing the opportunity to play in the MLB. So yeah, I wouldn't hate it, and it's cheap. It's going to be extremely cheap. So that sounds like Ricketts bonuses for everyone if that one happens.
100%. I think there's Now it's just most of the focus of this team is going to probably shift to pitching. I think they're still going to add a bat and some capability. I think if it's whether, like you said, like a platoon guy, maybe for third or something like that, they're going to do something else, but it's not going to be the big sexy move that I think every Cubs fan wants it to be. But rather, it's going to be a lot of ideally pitching. And I know, Brandon B says it here, Corbin, maybe, right? So now that they have this money, they're going to go sniff around some of these guys that originally maybe they weren't going to chase. I think everybody needs to remember too. People are probably like, well, why does the narrative constantly change? Because you don't know what's going to happen. If there's any sport in the world that's completely like, we have no fucking clue what's going to happen, it's baseball. That's exactly what it is. Like, yeah, you can put together a really good team and shit can go haywire and things don't work out, right? So I think there's still a lot to be said about the team this coming season. And Darren said this here a little bit earlier, and Cade Horton. I think this was in reference to your mention about Ben Brown and the bullpen. I think Cade Horton, the beauty of getting all these other starters, now the fans aren't calling for Cade Horton in April when he hasn't pitched more than like 12 games at the AAA level. Let the kid have a year of development. He lost half of last season to injury. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a huge developmental year for Cade Horton that got completely erased because of injuries. Ben Brown, you can make the same argument, even though I think everybody liked what they saw out of Ben Brown for the limited amount of action that he was actually with the team, but lost the rest of his season then to that pesky neck injury that seems like was finally figured out come the off season. So there's still a lot to happen. I think the Bellinger domino cannot be looked at as like, oh my God, this is awful. We're all gonna, nothing's gonna happen. It's gonna be terrible. That's not it. It's, you got to shuffle around pieces. Not everybody was going to be able to play every day, and you want these good players that you do have in the lineup. Michael Busch had a really good year. Kyle Tucker's a freaking stud. And Seiya Suzuki still had a really good year. I know a lot of people are down on Seiya Suzuki. He was the 18th best OPS in baseball last season. He was a top 20 offensive player.
And he can make the argument that for a lot of the year, he didn't have protection in the lineup. Now we're talking about Kyle Tucker in front of him. That's going to make it a lot easier for Seiya Suzuki to hit. He's not going to get game planned like he did in the past. I mean, obviously he'll be a guy that they focus on, but let's face it, a lot of the attention is going to go to Kyle Tucker. I also, too, to go back to the Bellinger trade here, I think glossing over Cody Potit is maybe some disservice. I'm not going to say that he's great, but looking at his baseball savant, we were going back and forth in the chat. There are some things that pop out to you. He's really good at missing barrels. That was something that, we were talking about in the group chat, and I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be a world beater. He's going to be a guy that, takes the reins and finds a way to, but we talk about it so often here. You have 162 games, 9 innings limited. You're going to have to fill those innings. And he's a capable arm. He's a guy who has 4 decent pitches. He has a good sinker from what I've seen too. So I don't want to jump ahead because I haven't done enough research, but immediately in my mind it goes, oh, is this like a Mark Leiter Jr. kind of thing, to where maybe you can use him in that. But I don't want to gloss over a guy that they've brought in because they obviously see something to ask for that back. Otherwise, that was the name that they had settled on. So let's see. He misses bats, and let's see where it comes from. I don't know. I don't think he's going to be a starter, but maybe he's a guy out of the bullpen that can get you out of trouble because he has the sinker.
100%.
He does miss a lot of bats in terms.
He does, and he's also got a 5-pitch arsenal too. So he throws a traditional 4-seamer, he throws a sinker, he throws a changeup, he throws a sweeper, he throws a curve. You know what he is? He's the inverse version of Matthew Boyd from a pitch arsenal.
And hey,
he literally is.
Yeah.
If you look at his baseball savant and you flipped it and then you looked up at Matthew Boyd's, it's almost the exact same thing. It's actually kind of creepy. And he's got kind of a funky arm angle. He throws it like a 39-degree arm angle. He's the type of guy that you can see it once you look at the baseball savant page and you go, I see why the Cubs like this guy. There's something in there that they want to tap into because he averages 15 inches of break on his sweeper, and another, pretty significant drop on his curve. This is a guy, and mind you, like people might look at the numbers and be like, well, he was good, but he didn't really pitch. Like he had 24 innings of big league time last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's largely a what if, but he's older, right? He's 30 years old. He's a longtime minor leaguer. He was a starter in the minors, though.
Yeah.
Right? That's why I agree with you, Juice. I looked at his page and immediately was like, he's a bullpen piece. They see this guy as a bullpen piece. And I know Brandon B says here a lot of pressure on the Wizard Hottovy, but Hottovy has been a Wizard.
They've done it.
We've seen it time and time again.
They did it. I mean, what did they get back for the Leiter Jr. trade? The right-hander.
Jack Neely.
He's touted. He's got great stuff. He's coming in.
And then Benjamin Cowles was the other name who's a top 30 Cubs prospect, and he's on the 40-man now.
So don't put it past Hottovy to get something out of this kid or the Cubs pitch lab. They've been. I mean, they don't hit on all of them. Let's definitely.
Nor will you ever.
No, and part of the problem with this team over the course of the last 2 years with the bullpen has been, in my opinion, too much faith in it. In this pitch lab, like you should go out there and get guys who throw 100 and just say, here, try to hit it because it's 100-mile-an-hour fastball. The Cubs need more of that. But I mean, who's to say that he doesn't get into there and starts throwing that sinker more often and is that poor man's Mark Leiter Jr. eventually? Who's to say?
I completely agree with you, Juice. I will say this. I have a funny little take on this. I was looking at something and something dawned in my eyes. Cody Potit was drafted in the 4th round of the 2015 Major League Baseball draft.
Yeah.
Do you know who else, Juice, was a part of the 2015 MLB draft?
That's not the Chris Bryant year. That's
later than that. Bryant was 13.
Is that Ian Happ? Okay.
You know who else was a part of that draft?
Who's that?
Dansby Swanson and
that's
Kyle
right.
Tucker.
All of them, yes.
I think Jed Hoyer has an obsession with the 2015 MLB draft because you know who the other names are in the top 12 of that draft that the Cubs have been linked to?
Who's that?
Alex Bregman and Josh Naylor.
Josh Naylor would be a nice get.
I'm 99% convinced that Jed Hoyer has an unhealthy obsession with the 2015 MLB draft.
I think somebody who gets Jed Hoyer on should ask him about that. Exactly.
If it's completely random or if it's like real.
Yeah, and also if he loves it, so I need to go down a rabbit hole with that. And just what
it's funny, dude. It's a good one.
Because then you start to think all right, he's trying to trade for all these guys. Theo Epstein was still here. So which guys did Theo like and which guys did Jed like? And what did they fall on?
Yeah. It's funny. That was a hilarious little take that I just discovered there. I was like, oh, wait a minute. This looks familiar. But yeah, so no, I agree with you, Juice. I think honestly, again, in this level of the trade of what it was designed to do, if you get anything out of Potit, that's a huge get. Sure. I mean, even if he's a bullpen arm that helps, like you said, right? There's so many innings you need to throw to get through the season. And you see it year in and year out. Teams go through 30, 40 pitchers, it feels like sometimes, just with all the roster moves and guys getting hurt. And, I'm sure Cody Potit's going to throw some level of innings on the team this year. Obviously, we'll find out more.
4 games. I mean, and this is what always makes me like, how many years? It was 2 years ago that they missed the playoffs by 1 game. I mean, these moves do matter because if you find somebody who can win you 3 out of the 4 out of nowhere, when you feel like you're losing on a getaway day or you're in a doubleheader and you have that 26th man come up and he pitches a second game and you have that guy who can actually get through 6 innings and give you some well-needed, depth in a doubleheader, like that matters so much. You know,
Definitely.
it's found money. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I definitely see what they see though, looking at his baseball savant. And I know you do too, because we're nerds like that. I got 5 texts post Bellinger trade. Like this Cody Potit guy sucks. And all my responses to him were, go to his baseball savant and look at that before you make any judgment on, you know, if he's good or not, because ERA only shows a limited amount of what, you know, a pitcher is really like. You know, we have so much data now. You really got to look at it and say, okay, I see why they like this guy.
100%. 100%. I agree, man. And there's going to be a lot of people. I don't worry, chat. We've seen you. I promise. It would just take us an extra hour of the show to get through every single one of your guys' comments. I understand there's a lot of people that are upset about this Bellinger trade. I do, and I get it. And those feelings will subside, I'm sure, at some point. But the Cubs are not done. Like they can't be done. There are jobs on the line. There's too many expectations now already with the Kyle Tucker trade. Things are going to happen. And again, I hate to see Belly go. I hope he plays really well in New York, even though I don't like the Yankees. But I hope Belly has a good individual season for sure. It's one of those things. It's sometimes you're not going to fit everybody on the roster. There's only so many places in baseball you can play people. And unfortunately for Bellinger, he plays positions that the Cubs have guys that they've identified as arguably organizational pillars in terms of Pete Crow Armstrong and Kyle Tucker, you know, and a Michael Busch who is playing very, very well at first base right now. That's where Belly plays. Like I said, if Belly could play third base, Belly'd still be on this roster. I can promise you that. But because of that, you know, it becomes crowded a little bit, and you got to figure out who's going to play where. And Ian Happ certainly isn't going anywhere. I hate the lunacy of people thinking they should trade Ian Happ. He gives you stuff that you need. Like, he's still a good baseball player. But that's neither here nor there.
To round this whole Bellinger trade out, John Heyman 44 minutes ago, Blue Jays were also interested in Bellinger. That helped the Cubs to do the deal they wanted, sending just $5 million to offset the $52.5 owed to Bellinger over the next 2 years. So just interesting to see, you know, that there was. I actually been the guy who said I think that this deal was because there wasn't much of a market for Cody Bellinger. I thought it was most of the Yankees, considering what we had seen, you know, via reports. But there actually was some interest in his services, which allowed them to, you know, get the deal they wanted from the Yankees, which was only sending the $5 million over.
Yeah, that was big, right? There was less cash they had to send. It's nice when you get other people involved, because then you have leverage, and that's what 100%. The Cubs ultimately did. And honestly, good on the Cubs for not just like making the trade and rolling over and playing dead and giving the Yankees what they wanted. They held strong. You got the deal that you wanted to make out of it. Now go use that money. Go get a Corbin Burns. Go get somebody who's going to make an impact on this roster. And I bet you a lot of people will change their tune about this trade if they use the dollars appropriately. Juice, any final thoughts, my friend, before we wrap up this talk here?
No, I hope we get off of this, and within like maybe a couple hours, we're texting about having to do another show, because it'd be really nice to have some news quick before this holiday season kind of starts to begin. I know myself, I'll once I get through this weekend is kind of my cutoff for the year, and I'll be kind of putting my feet up and relaxing. So hopefully Jed and company, kind of like Dead and Company, but it's Jed and Company. They keep working their butts off to get this roster better, because I think it's going in the right direction. I'm actually pretty pleased, because I think if to put this just in the simplest of roster terms, the Cubs, in my opinion, coming into this year, had the least flexible roster in terms of where they could go. And now I think they have one of the most flexible in terms of where they can go right now. Does that make sense? Like
yes.
They were kind of painted in a corner going into this offseason, and now I think we're in the center of the room where we can now move. So good on Jed. I know that's tough, especially considering what's coming out from the Ricketts family with the budgets and all of that. So it'd be interesting to see what he does with his remaining, what is it, $40 million that they have before they get to that first
like
level.
Yeah, it's like $40-ish million. There's some wiggle room there, but it's roughly about $40 million.
Yeah, somebody said it's like 50 because they usually save 8 to 10 for like trades and bonuses
in season.
and
Yeah.
incentives and stuff like that. So about 40 million. So figure it out.
Figure it out. No,
Figure it out.
and they absolutely will. Juice, my final thoughts for people is even if the Cubs don't do anything this week, Cubs on Tap will have another show. We will be back on Thursday. It is a guest
Look at that.
episode. I am not going to tease anything because I want everybody to tune in. We have a couple of guests, other people in the world of talking about the Chicago Cubs on microphones, and I think it's I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good show. Very excited for that, and hope everybody tunes in and checks that out. And as Juice noted, hopefully the Cubs give us a reason to slap together an emergency show and get back on the microphones again, because then that means something happened, and then we have more things to talk about.
I know that we can be excited and talk about what's next, and then we can slowly inch our way to the season, which under 100 days.
Under 100 days, yeah.
Like, I can't believe it. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's 100 days for the rest of Major League Baseball, not the Cubs and Dodgers with their 2-game series in Japan for opening day. And it's 100 days until I turn 30 is what that means, because my birthday is opening day this year.
You know, it'd be really nice if
what's that?
You know, under 100 days, we're watching, you know, Yamamoto, Roki Sasaki. That'd be kind of cool too, right?
I mean, that would be cool. That would be cool. And that's kind of what I wanted to allude to really quick, Juice, just to kind of keep people, what's the term I'm looking for? I guess keep things in perspective in terms of the world and time. Roki Sasaki is probably going to sign on January 15th.
Yeah.
Because that's when all the new money for the international pool happens and everybody can bid on him. But he's talking to teams already. That's happening already because he's been posted. So he probably will sign immediately on the 15th is my guess. Like, I bet you there will be a deal in place with where he's going prior to that. And then when it can become official, it'll become official.
It'd be so nice if he signed on the 16th, because that's my birthday, January 16th.
That would be cool. And it would be really cool because then on January 17th is Cubs convention.
Look at that.
For the rest of that weekend. So, again, just to also highlight to people, like, we're a month away from CubsCon. I mean, things are moving quickly, right? Holidays happen fast. Things are going to happen fast, and surely the Cubs are going to continue to do other things. Obviously, making Carson Kelly official from the catching position was huge. Kyle Tucker, obviously the big fish so far, and we'll continue to see what they do from here. Juice, as always, want to remind everybody, check out our friends over at the Dingers podcast as well, but continue to follow us here at Cubs on Tap, at Cubbies on Tap on the socials. Like, subscribe, hit the bell button on the YouTube channel. You'll know when we and all of our other great shows here at the On Tap Sports Network go live. You know where to follow us on the socials. Most of you guys have listened long enough, and if you aren't sure, check out all the descriptions of the podcast, and you can find all of our linked handles and things like that on the socials right over there. OnTapSportsNet.com, at OnTapSportsNet on the socials, the OnTap Sports. I'm going to check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Juice, it was good to talk to you, my friend. If we don't get on a microphone again before the holidays, I wish you happy holidays to you and yours. I wish that to all of our listeners well, if people like yourself kind of tune out during the holiday season. And baseball's coming. It's coming quick, and the Cubs are doing some shit. And we'll have to wait and see what happens. But
same to you, man. Definitely have a happy holidays, and I also echo that sentiment. Merry Christmas, whatever you guys celebrate, to all our listeners.
Absolutely. What do you say, Juice? What do you got anything on now?
FTC.
FTC, baby. And let's go Cubbies.